Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our second C4 Jedi Speaker Series. We're going to get started in just 2 more minutes. If you have any questions in advance for our speaker today, you can pop those in the chat. We're going to be hearing from Troy Gonsalves for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll save 10 minutes for Q&A. All right, everyone. Welcome again to our second installation of C4 Jedi Speaker Series, where we highlight industry professionals with firsthand experience in their respective subject matter. Today, we have with us Troy Gonsalves, who is a career and recruitment strategist, marketer, and astrologer for purpose-driven, high-performing professionals and companies globally. He has transformed over 15 years of experience in recruitment, sales, customer service, and operations into helping professionals build their personal brands and get the job they want by enhancing their online, offline professional assets, also allowing them to increase their confidence and momentum and marketability. Troy is going to be outlining some key steps that he took throughout his career to increase the diverse client pool and talent pool during a time when the unemployment rate in Canada was substantially low. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Troy.
Hi, August.
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
Good. Thank you for
Thanks for
having me
being with
on.
us.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so we can jump right into it and get the show on the road. And start my presentation. Sorry, my computer's misbehaving just a little bit, but there's a lot. Apologies for the delay here.
No worries. Take your time.
This isn't coming up. 1 second, August. Perfect. Thank you for your patience, everyone. So today we'll talk about how to use publicly accessible data to drive team engagement and attract a diverse talent pool. I'll talk also a little bit about myself and in what capacity did I develop this method and some of the results that we saw as a result. And so I'm Troy Gonsalves, and I'm the founder and creative of Promethean Professional Services, Simulated Interviews, Infinity Resumes, and Check-in with Troy. Like August mentioned, I provide career branding, recruitment strategy, astrology advice to high-performing, purpose-driven professionals who are, pretty high up in their careers and or are looking to start their own organization. I spent roughly 15 years within the aviation industry, and my career within aviation started in 2005 at a company called CanJet in Toronto. I then switched over to Porter Airlines, which is a pretty well-known airline in Canada, and I spent roughly about 13 years at Porter Airlines. I worked in 4 different teams, including positions in customer service, operations, corporate sales, and then people and culture. My last stint within people and culture, I was a senior talent acquisition specialist tasked with recruiting, supporting the entire organization in recruitment of quite a bit of staff. At the end of my tenure at Porter, I supported the recruitment of over 1,300 team members across all different teams and all different functions. Now, one thing you have to know about aviation in general is it is a very it's a business with a lot of tight margins and doesn't necessarily have the resources some organizations have to dedicate to salaries. And so the time I was in recruitment was from the period between 2016 to 2019. And at the time, we saw the lowest unemployment rate in over 50 years within Canada. And so when I joined the recruitment team, I was coming from a sales marketing background. And so I was very data focused. And the first thing I did was take an assessment of what we did for recruitment. And honestly, it was pretty much a post and pray method that many are probably familiar with. And there weren't many data points to utilize within our recruitment efforts. So it was really lacking a lot of data utilization methods, which are very common within a sales and marketing perspective. And so the first thing I did was to introduce daily tracking on some key metrics and points in order to understand how we were performing from a recruitment perspective, recruitment marketing perspective, and also be able to get the right people within the job. And so I introduced recruitment website traffic tracking, and that's pretty simple. That's like looking at, how many people are visiting our job page every single day, what positions are being visited the most, why, what are the sources for that traffic. I also introduced, tracking of applicant conversion rate. So how many visitors we got versus how many people actually converted actual applicants. I also introduced the tracking of candidate sourcing channels. So where were they coming from exactly? Was it, third-party sources? Was it LinkedIn? Was it, a campaign that we ran on Google Ads? Where exactly are these people coming from? Is it just organic traffic that we saw? Also looked at the cost per applicant. In some cases, we were paying, certain websites to promote our jobs, and we can tell where they were coming from. And so we looked at the cost of that per day and what did that mean? Like, how much is this actually costing us to recruit from these different sources in order to justify any kind of strategy that I would need to implement moving forward. I also looked at the interview to offer ratio, which is a very common ratio in recruitment to observe. And so basically it's how many people are you interviewing in order to offer a job. And so we're getting that picture of the recruitment funnel more painted with more and more detail so that can inform strategy on how we move forward. And overall, we can also track candidate diversity and see how many candidates, out of the candidates that selected that they identified with a particular group, what was the makeup of the candidates compared to all the other applicants. And so overall, what we saw is we needed to be more targeted and proactive in our overall outreach plan. And so I started to develop and really think about, okay, how do we do that? We have some data points now in terms of what our recruitment marketing results were and, how we were performing. And we were hiring approximately, 450 people every year. And so based off of the numbers that we had, we definitely needed to get at a certain candidate level also considering things like, diversity, our salary range and everything else, and all the other organizational objectives that we had. And so I started to look at, I'm like, okay, I have a lot of information from an organizational perspective. I'm like, what data is out there that can be leveraged in Toronto to help inform help inform this process even further in terms of, you know, who are we looking for and where are they within the city? And so I came across public city data from the City of Toronto website through an open data portal that the city does every few years. And so we were able to obtain data connected to things like the education of all the citizens, with not all, but everyone who completed the census. We were able to obtain the education of different citizens within Toronto and look at what their education level was per neighborhood. And so here on the right-hand side, you see this is the city of Toronto, and then we have all 140 neighborhoods broken out across the axis and how many people within each of those neighborhoods within the city held specific degrees. And that could be, apprenticeship programs, MBAs, more technical skills and trades. And so we were able to get this data in raw form. And so we'll get to what we did with that data. And so we also were able to get data that showed us Indigenous representation across the city. Again, you have to understand, this is citywide data. And so these totals that you see in this column, this first column marked City of Toronto, is across the entire city. And then everything here is broken out by neighborhood. And so we were able to get a very clear picture as to where people are within the city. We also looked at information like representation, ethnic origin and representation. We looked at income levels within the city itself, and to see, based off the different positions that we were marketing for, are we in the right place? Is there going to be good visibility on the jobs that we are putting out? We also looked at, the journey to work. So again, we looked at that per neighborhood. So how long did it take people to commute from their home to their work? And so we had that information broken down by neighborhood within the city of Toronto. And so this can really help to inform, if we know that, the candidate that we're going after is, if we have like a certain salary level that we are, offering for a position, we know that accessibility to transit would be an important factor in where we marketed our jobs across the city, because it would have to be relatively accessible via public transit. Because, driving to the location wouldn't necessarily make sense for some of the roles that, perhaps we were recruiting for at the time. We can also look at things like languages. And so this is particularly important, for example, recruiting for a call center in Canada, you might need both English and French speaking people. And you want to know where they are in the city and how you can get in front of them via job fairs or, different marketing campaigns. And so we got a lot of really great information from the city data portal. We also looked at visible minority breakdown right across different neighborhoods by different characteristics. We also, and the equivalent to this for the Americans that are tuning into this, the equivalent for you would be the US Census Bureau. And I did dive into some of their data points at the Census Bureau, and it does do a pretty good job of covering off different um, locations and states pretty comprehensively with much of the similar data points that I was able to obtain through the City of Toronto data portal. And so I had all this raw data, and I'm like, this is great. This can be really useful. What do I do with it? And so the first thing that I did was partner with and collaborate with our business intelligence team in order to visualize this data. And so our business intelligence team typically works on things like, loyalty marketing and works on initiatives to do with flight operations and how to efficiently, plan a flight from point A to point B. And so I knew that they were really good at taking a lot of data and visualizing it and making sense of it. And so I approached the business development head and explained, what we wanted to do. They were very excited about the project because now they get to work on a different problem that really helps the organization from a hiring perspective. And so when they were introduced, introduced to what we were working on, they were using the program Tableau, which is a data visualization tool that can map, geographic data against any data point that you have. And what this allows you to do is really be able to develop some intersectional analysis across different demographical points, right? So if, we wanted to know where exactly in the city can we find, French-speaking Indigenous people for our call center, or where can we obtain people who had, trade certificates, but also are women, right? So, we can look at the city in a whole different way with the integration of Tableau and our business intelligence team to help us visualize this data. And then we also collaborated with our marketing team. Once we had the data, we understood, okay, some of the, candidate profiles and where they are, we collaborated internally with our marketing team to create digital and physical branding assets. And so that could be things like, the ads that you see pop up on like Instagram or Google Word ads that, looked at what people were searching. And then through even like Facebook, you can be highly targeted with the ads that you were running and where exactly, where geographically those ads can show up. And so it was really great to get them involved because, again, one of the things that I found is people were really excited to work on a different problem other than the problems that they worked on, day to day. So if you're thinking about how, you can elevate your recruitment marketing approach internally within your organizations, you have a lot of great people who know a lot of things that can really help and support this effort. And so our marketing team was very useful from that perspective. And then we collaborated with the employee data analyst. And so this was really interesting because what we did, I was able to get the same data points that I had externally, but the internal data to see exactly where the employees were located in relation to where are some of the potential candidates were located. And so we were all able to overlay this information. And what that did, like, for example, it produced some really interesting trends. And so when you look at this internal employee data analysis, from 2006 to 2019, you saw where over time, as the city, for example, got more expensive, employees had to move further and further out. And, they were often kind of clustered around subway systems or clustered around like highways, right? And so it was really interesting to like see some of those trends. But what that was able to do for us as well is to get employees engaged on helping the recruitment efforts, because if employees are in certain neighborhoods, we were able to then incentivize our entire workforce, specifically in Toronto, with the distribution of physical assets to certain public locations that we know people would congregate at. And we know in that neighborhood, there would be people who might not be aware of our organization from an employer perspective. So places like libraries and schools or gyms, and all it took was to develop a very a good looking postcard or poster, and we incentivized employees through Starbucks gift cards to drop off these posters and pin them up in different public locations with a QR code that they can just scan and quickly hit our website and apply for the many different positions that we had there. And so it was really great to be able to bring in the larger workforce in this effort, and that would have only been possible by visualizing and overlaying both internal data, but also external data and information. The other way that this really helped is that through this information, we were able to collaborate and identify external partners and community groups to participate in very targeted job fairs. If we knew that, hey, there's a large French-speaking population in a certain part of the city, we can look to see, who is, are there any workforce development groups that we can partner with to host a job fair, or maybe they're already running one, or, if there's a large Indigenous population in a certain area, again, we would reach out to a community group to partner with them on a job fair. And so it really was able to take not only our digital recruitment strategy to another level, but also how we engaged in person, and really be able to do that in a very, very targeted way. You can even do things like partnering with politicians who love to showcase, jobs in one way or the other. And so there was some of that as well, where, there would be certain politicians who would host job fairs or company showcases, and we were able to be present there, showing support for them and what their efforts were doing, as well as building out our own employer brand. You could then even take this a step further and target and engage with local ethnic newsletters and papers in their own language. And so Canada is or Toronto specifically, is a very diverse city with over 180 different ethnicities right across the city. And so we had a good idea of, where different ethnicities are. And so through local ethnic newsletters, we can develop content that spoke directly to that group in their own language, in order to build an employer brand and perhaps get candidate engagement and interaction with those groups. Now, when I was leading this effort, I didn't have the tools necessarily that are currently available. And so it's really interesting to think about how you can leverage AI at all steps of the process that I just articulated, from sorting through data, generating custom marketing material at scale, even generating them in different languages, and developing different archetypes of what your ideal candidate profile is. And the use of AI can really help to accelerate this even further. And so it's a really different playing field that we're in now, and it makes everything that I just talked about a lot easier, and you can act on it a lot quicker. Here are a few things though that you can do to increase your employer brand and just get more candidates. The first thing is like to make your career tab more visible, to increase visits and therefore applicants. For some reason, I don't know why, but organizations always bury their career tab at the bottom in the footer of a page. And I understand, real estate on a web page is, kind of like real estate in like a big city. But if talent is a priority for you and you have a lot of people coming to your website for whatever reason, if they're purchasing plane tickets from you, those are potentially your future employees as well. And so making your career tab more visible to increase visits and therefore applicants onto your career site is something simple that any team member, like any marketing team, can help to facilitate. And really, it can really drive more applicants to you. Also, embedding a career call to action in newsletters or sale communications that is frequently distributed and sent out is another cheap, cheerful way of leveraging resources and communications that you already have, and diversifying it a little bit, and perhaps showcasing some of the jobs that you have open on those newsletters to clients or customers. As an example, airlines send out, sale messages weekly, and they're highly targeted and specific to different regions. They also hire in different regions. And so if you're already communicating with the public, telling them about your sales, why not also communicate to them and tell them about, like we're also hiring. Yes, fly with us, but work with us as well. We tested this out and we saw, I think it was up to like the click-through rate on it went from like 2% to about 6% in terms of how many more people engaged on the newsletter, clicking through to the website with a career call to action. And another useful method from a recruitment perspective that can really complement all the data efforts as well is to build a distinct employer brand. Now, what is an employer brand? It's like your consumer brand, but it's specifically targeted at attracting talent. And there are many elements to an employer brand. How you communicate with your potential candidates. Are you being upfront about what the compensation is? What is the tone? What is the look? What is the feel of it? Who do you partner with? From a job related perspective. Like, do you have industry partners? What is the culture like on your team? And so, organizations can really benefit from developing a really distinct employer brand. And I would even go further by branding your talent team or your recruitment team. This can be really helpful in separating recruitment, which is a very sales, people-driven kind of function, separating that from HR, which is often seen more as, don't hate me for this, but like police officers, right? And so separating these two functions by developing distinct brands for your talent team will really help in articulating to candidates what your organization is all about, but also using that talent brand internally to separate from the HR side, which is more about policy and rule enforcement. And so I found that to be very helpful. I actually led the development of our own talent brand, which was called Porter Talent. Um, and I found it very, very useful. And so by doing like a combination of these efforts over time, over the 3 years, we definitely saw a significant increase, in candidate diversity. We saw faster time to hire. We also saw an expanded talent pool in general because we were hitting more people right across the city. And we also were able to really build up our brand recognition from an employer perspective over that time in different communities right across the city. And so that is what I do. And so in terms of if anyone is interested in working with me, this is my contact information. And I do actually partner with Cream City Conservation on all these efforts to ensure that we look at our recruitment strategy and talent strategy through a JEDI lens. And so we are partnering on employer branding, recruitment marketing, talent advisory, and/or outplacement services. And that's all that I have for you. And I'll take any questions that you might have now.
Thank you so much, Troy. So we've got our first question from
Yeah,
Amy, who is asking, what's a career call? I've never heard of this.
a career.
Career call,
Oh,
Amy
I
said.
think yeah, career call to action. And so I think she was referring to the newsletter where I had career call to action. And so that would be um, basically telling people to come join us, come join our team, look at the available, visit our career page, or what if you're like in a unique industry, let's say aviation, don't just fly with us, work with us. Some kind of call to action to get people to know that, hey, you cannot just, you don't have to just use our services, but you can be a part of our team as well.
Awesome. Do we have any other questions from folks on the line? We have a lot of folks who are in the environmental industry, in
Yeah.
nonprofit. We've got folks who are in international development. So yeah, any other questions for Troy, friends? And you're also welcome to unmute yourself and ask your question directly. All right.
All
Oh, here
right.
we go. So we've got one. Shelley asks, do you have any advice for smaller employers, like under 50 employees?
Yeah. For all employers, I think it's important to really have a um, a robust employer brand, especially in your early stages, so that you can attract people with the same methodologies that you use, or attract candidates with the same methodologies that you use to attract consumers. And that includes things like managing like your employer brand reputation very closely. And so, sites like Glassdoor and Indeed have people going online, your former employees going online, and depending on their experience, they will leave a review. And so looking at those more closely and taking it very seriously, because, one of the things that we found in the work that we were doing, looking at the overall brand reputation of an organization, was that the higher our rating was on a site like Glassdoor or like on Indeed or what have you, the higher the applicant conversion was. And so we made deliberate efforts to engage our employees, regardless of if they had, a good experience with the organization or not. We we asked them to go on Glassdoor and leave a review on the organization. And these were current employees, and we were encouraging them to do that. When they did, and those ratings went up, we saw like a we saw that influence the applicant ratio directly because of our higher rating. So for employers under 50 employees, yeah, take your really be focused on preserving your employer brand reputation as you are focused on the product or service that you're offering.
Thanks so much, Trey. I actually have a question for you that I think some folks might be interested in, and that is, what advice do you have for smaller organizations or any organization really, where they don't maybe have a position open right now, or they're hiring more so on a smaller basis, like maybe one person at a time? What advice do you have to to move them from waiting until they have a
Yeah,
position that's open? Like, what could they be doing differently?
yeah, for sure. That's a good question. And so organizations are often involved, regardless of the size, in interesting projects, whether it be, figuring out some kind of like problem or solving some problem for a community, or whether they are, um, integrating a new customer facing system. Organizations on a daily basis are tackling these interesting problems. And at the end of the day, when you're hiring people, you're hiring them to help you solve a problem. And what I would do, I would encourage organizations, smaller organizations, to build the brands of your managers and people leaders by either, looking at a platform like LinkedIn where you can showcase an organizational problem that you're helping to solve and see who's attracted to it. And that that kind of outreach where you're giving some insight into what the organization is up to and what is it that we're doing and how we're doing it will not only attract people who might be consuming your services or products, but it will also attract people who might be interested in helping you solve those problems. And therefore building somewhat of a talent pipeline. Now you need to be a little bit more organized when you're launching such an event to ensure that you're understanding the purpose of why people are attending, perhaps collecting their emails, and go through some coaching with your team or your people leaders who would be front and center in showcasing why should anyone work for them, why should anyone work for you, like as much as you know organizations ask, why do you want to work for us? I think candidates are also asking the opposite. Why should I work for you? And showcasing that up front, I think, would be really engaging on any level.
Amazing. Any last questions, friends? All right. Well, before we wrap up, then I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen really briefly here. Again, Troy, thank you so much for sharing your insight with us
Yeah,
today. Friends, if you'd like to get a hold of Troy, you can contact him at troy@checkinwithtroy.com. Also, we are in partnership with Troy's companies through our cohort program. Speaking of which, just to give you all a little background for those of you who may or may not be familiar with Queen City Conservation, we are a two-pronged social enterprise based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but working globally. I am the founder and CEO of Cream City Conservation, and we are a certified B Corp, which means that we are part of a global community and movement that focuses on inclusive, equitable, and regenerative economic systems. This means that we are a social enterprise. We have the pleasure of being able to work closely with environmental organizations, community-based organizations all across the globe, helping them to identify any practices that might be hindering their diversity, as well as providing them with insight for building better cultures, building better practices. We do this within a closed loop system, again, of leveraging our profits from the consulting work and funneling that into direct hands-on service to public lands via our social impact portion of the company called Cream City Conservation Corps. Annually, we employ anywhere from 20 to 50 high school students around Milwaukee, working closely with the U.S. Forest Service, as well as the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, and Milwaukee County Parks. We also work in the space of connecting young people to conservation, be it through plant species, trail building, tree planting. We also partner with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewerage District around water, introducing young people, both high school and college students, to careers in green infrastructure and climate resiliency. We also work in the space of food and food sovereignty, partnering with the Boys and Girls Club, as well as other community gardens and our local public high schools, teaching young folks about soil science and entrepreneurship and growing food from seed. One of my favorite projects is with the Vincent High School and Boys and Girls Club. And lastly, but most importantly, we also work in the space of policy. And we do this by connecting young people to their elected officials, connecting them to civic engagement and advocacy opportunities. In front of you here is a photo of our current Milwaukee Mayor, Chevy Johnson, and former Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes. Again, these young folks learn about how the importance of voting, the importance of staying informed with what's happening in their civic environment, what they can do if they are not yet eligible to vote, how they can mobilize their friends and family to ensure that our elected officials protect our planet for generations to come. So if you all would like support in how to apply what you've learned today, as well as some of our other topics in the Jedi speaker series, I invite you to look into our Jedi cohort, which is offered twice a year. Our next one is starting in January. I'm going to link in a link to our what do you call this here? Sorry, our site that has more information about the program and how you can apply. This is again a wraparound support system that is guided primarily by me, but also with other sub-consultants. And we take a three-phased approach of essentially assessing your organization's existing culture and policies, as well as providing insight and education to you and your staff via a series of workshops that build upon one another to establish shared language. And from there, we help you apply that learning through a roadmap creation, both an internal work plan and a public facing roadmap. So again, I invite you to apply today. I think we have 3 more slots available for January. If you'd like more information, here's my contact info. And I hope you all have an amazing week. And we will see you at our next session, which is next week, Wednesday. Again, same time, 11 Central, 12 Eastern. And we will be hearing from Carmela Montenegro. So again, take care, everyone, and have an amazing Wednesday.